Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri and today I'm actually going to be going through the layers menu so that you guys know how to actually properly use it. This is probably the one thing that unless you're actually familiar with a painting software you may not be familiar with, because it does require a little bit of getting used to. Essentially what the layers panel does is it allows you to apply several different modifications or image overlays onto your existing image. So for this example, I do have my two images once again open. I'm going to start off with my basic one. The background has all been flattened. The only thing that's on a new layer is literally my text that says flatten image. So I'm just going to turn that off. And the reason why you would use your layers is, and why it's so useful, is that let's say I wanted to edit this. Okay, so I'm just going to make my background editable because if I don't do that, I can't actually edit it. And I'm switching to the marquee tool for now. Actually, I'm going to move to the move tool. So let's say I want to only move the banner, and I want to move that around. The way I would do that normally is if it was on a separate layer, I could just move it. But in this case, because it's attached to the background, I can't actually do that yet. So when I move it, it moves the whole background image, and I don't want that. I want to only select the banner. So I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to switch back to my example page. And now I do have several layers within this image, and I can modify these however I want. So if I select the Yarkspiri Fantasy Art banner and I want to move it, I can do that. It's a different layer, so I have that option. I can put it here, I can put it anywhere I want, really. It's a template I created so that I could move it around. Now, let's say I liked the whole image, but I didn't want to keep that banner. I wanted to replace it with something else. Once again, because this is on a different layer, I can easily turn this off. All I have to do is go to the little eye icon here and turn it off. And now you don't see it. If I want it back, no problem. I just click it again and it turns it back on. So already you can see how having different layers can actually allow you to do a lot of more modifications to an image. So how is this useful? Well, first of all, it depends on what you're going to actually use this image for. So in this case, I'm probably going to add information within this. I might change the text, for example, or add additional text. This is a template that I've created so that I can essentially use it for signage, which is the original reason why I use this. So in that regards, having different layers for different objects makes it highly valuable to me because it's a lot easier to work with. I could change my background, I could turn it off, turn it back on. I can turn on and off the text. All that is very useful. How does this apply though to if I was actually trying to paint something? If I was trying to paint something, I might paint maybe an eye, but I'm not sure if the eye is going to turn out, or it would require me too much editing time to have to repaint over that, depending on what type of filters I have and various other aspects. So what I could do is I could create a new layer. So I just created a new layer, and I'm just switching to my brush tool here, and I'm going to switch to white so you can actually see this. And maybe I'm just painting here, and I want to paint an eye. Now this is a really bad eye. I'm actually using my mouse right now because it's easier to show you guys some of the attributes. Okay, this is a terrible eye. I don't like this eye. I want to remove it. Click it off, it's gone. So in that case, that's when you would use multiple layers. Now there is a downside using multiple layers in an image. When you have too many layers, it makes it extremely heavy, the files. So your file size will increase the more layers you add to an image. So that is an important factor when you're working with your layers. But there's a lot more options those are just the basic options. What I can do with layers, like I said, is if you go to this little eye, you can turn it on and off. I can also lock a layer. So if I don't want to be able to edit this layer, I have this layer selected, I could hit this little icon, and it has a little padlock, click that, and now that entire layer is locked. So if I try to move it, I get a little, I won't be able to move it. It'll give me a little warning saying that I can't move it because it is locked. Now, please be aware though, if you do start locking your layers, you do have to unlock them depending on what type of modifications you're doing. So if you do decide to, let's say, flatten all your layers and all that, it can sometimes cause some issues. So keep track of which layers you've locked. Or what you could do is, if you're able to do this, group all your layers that have been locked underneath the same folder. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. Like I said, there's a lot of different options that you can apply to this. So if I look in the bottom here, I have some additional tools. So let's say I don't like that example page here, and I don't want to keep it. I want to get rid of it. I can hit the little trash can here in the bottom right, and it'll ask me, it'll give me a prompt, do you want to essentially delete this layer? And it'll tell me what it is, and in this case I'll hit yes. Okay, so now it's gone. I'm going to undo that because I do want to keep that. Now, let's say I want to create a new layer. There's actually a little icon here that is used to create a new layer. So if I click that, it'll create a new layer, and once again I can paint, switch to white. I can paint whatever I want here, and it won't necessarily affect any of the bottom layers. So I'm just going to delete that layer because I don't need it. There's also this little icon here, which is extremely useful. You can already see that in my menu I've already created a folder. So I'm going to create a new folder. Okay, I'm going to label it test folder for now. I'm going to add a new layer to it. Essentially what these folders does is it allows you to organize what you have. So I'm going to switch tools here. I'm just going to use the marquee tool here. And I'm just going to fill that with white. Okay, so, and I'm going to add some text. For some reason my default's sideways. And I'm just going to label this test for now. Alright. What's that? Someone in the center here. Okay, so this is my little test box here. So my basic template is in a different folder, so I can always turn that on and off if I want to. But let's say I have some information from a different file that I want to import. I can do that, and I can put it into a little folder so that it's separate and I can keep track of it. Essentially, it is what the name is. It's a folder that allows you to organize in categories and subcategories. So I can actually create a new group here in a new folder. So it's main test folder maybe, and hide that. And once again, I can have multiple folders within folders. You may want to simplify that. Once again, I tend to, as I work, flatten anything that I know I'm not going to change. That is an important thing to do, because if you don't do that, what tends to happen is you have way too many folders. It's hard to keep track of, and you just get mixed up when you're trying to do your editing. So because this is all in one folder, I'm just going to delete all that because I don't need it. Open this back up. Okay, now here's an interesting one here. If you click here, you actually can modify all the settings on your layer. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm just going to pull that above that so it's not mixing up with the layers I want to keep. Okay, so I'm just going to create a new box. I'm going to actually add a color to it. You'll see in a moment why. It does affect this differently if it has a color, depending on what you choose. Okay, so this is colored green. Okay, and I'm going to apply maybe a curves layer. You may not see it too much. So essentially what it does is it creates a new layer where there's modifications to it. Now I obviously don't want to keep any of those modifications, but the nice thing is, let's say I do keep this. I don't like this, but I might need that later on. I can turn that off. So it's not a permanent modification, which is extremely useful. I can change a lot of the settings here. There's a lot to play with. You pretty much have carte blanche when you want to play with these settings, depending on which one you choose. So in this case I chose curves, so this gives me a little graph in which I can add multiple points and modify the entire image. I don't want this though, so I'm going to get rid of that for now. Okay, so there's a couple of other ones. You can change maybe the color balance. This is how you can actually change really quickly what colors you want to show up. I'm actually going to change the highlights to red. So more of the highlights are actually a red tone. Change that even more. So now it's starting to get really bright. Obviously this is not something I would, colors I would choose, but it does get the point across for you guys. So yeah, it creates a new layer. The only downside to this is that it does tend to create these modifications on pretty much essentially to all the layers. It can also affect layers above it. It's kind of finicky when it wants to affect those and when it doesn't. So just please be aware of that. It is different in that you can turn it on and off. What you can also do too, because it automatically creates a little mask layer, is if you paint with black, there we go. Okay, and as you can see, I'm just masking out right now. I'm painting with black in order to mask out the areas that I essentially don't want to be affected by this modifier. So just by painting, you can affect these. You can modify it. So if I'm like doing touch-ups on my own picture, I can do that, and I can limit it to certain areas. So I'm just going to get rid of this because I don't need that. Yes. Okay. And now you have your mask layer. So I have my little green box here. I just clicked it, and what it did is it created another little box right next to it. This has to be selected, so you actually have to click on that in order to actually be able to affect it. Now with painting just with black and white, I can change how that is affected. So it literally masks certain areas. So if I click on there, I'm just going to show you again, you'll actually see some black portions probably popping up depending on how big I paint this. Yeah, there's a little line up there. I can change, obviously, depending on what type of brush I use, I can actually meld that in together. I can get quite a few effects with this. It just depends on what you actually want to do. And let's say I don't want to keep this. I can actually remove it. So I can actually disable the layer mask, which just hides it essentially, but it doesn't permanently delete it. Or I can delete the layer mask entirely. So now it's completely gone. Now I have that selected. I can click on here, and I can actually add some additional like drop shadows, inner shadows. These are all different blending options I can change. Now here, up here, if you look in the opacity, I can actually change how dark this is or how translucent that layer is. Very useful if you have multiple layers, or if you're adding shading on a separate layer, you can do that. Something I do actually quite often. In this menu here, you have your different blending modes for your layer. So I have green right now. I change it to luminosity. So essentially it affects how this layer interacts with the below layers. And if I scroll up, it will change how that interaction is applied. So right now it's set to color, so it only colors that layer instead. Saturation changes how it blends once again. There's a lot of different options in this, so it is a good idea to experiment with these different options till you come across one that you might enjoy using. I tend to stick with the color option, the overlay option and multiply option. Those are my normal ones. The default option, which is important to note, is actually the normal option here. That's a normal mode. There's no blending applied to it. Okay, so I'm just going to switch this back to normal. As a default, your folders that you create, your groups, they are set to pass-through mode. Okay, keep that in mind. It is very good to know, because if you have problems with how the blending is interacting, chances are your group has been changed and it's no longer set to pass-through mode. If that happens, you just change it back. But that's a general thing that will happen to you eventually, if not immediately. And you'll be wondering, why is my layer not behaving as it should? Chances are this was not set to the correct setting. Layers below it, though, are normally set to normal unless specified otherwise. Okay? So your main group or folder is always set to pass-through, but then your individual layers are normally set to normal as a default setting. So keep that in mind. You're going to need to know that. Okay, so I do have some additional options here. I actually don't use any of these. I don't find these useful for painting purposes. You do have this one here, which essentially it prevents you from actually being able to move it, but you can still paint on it. So if I change that to black, you'll see that this is locked for movement, so I can't move it. Clicking on it, it's not going to let me move it. However, if I try to paint on it, I can paint it. I can still add a mask to it. That's still allowed. Those are the only settings. It's just a movement that's not allowed in this case. Okay, so I'm going to turn that off. Let's say I don't want to be able to paint on it, but I want to be able to move it. So I'm happy with how it's been painted. So essentially I just click on this and it does the same thing, except just for painting. So I could still move this. That's not a problem. If I try to paint on top of it, I have a mask on there, so just go back to here. If I try to paint on it, it's not going to let me. So I'm actually set to brush, and I actually get a little do not sign on following my cursor. If I try to mask it, I can still do that. That's still allowed. The only thing that has been the only thing I'm being prevented of doing is painting, essentially. Okay, so I'm going to switch that, turn that off. In general, you'll probably only use these first three. This one is, I don't find useful at all, so I'm not even going to bother going over it. But as for these three, you could possibly use these. I tend to rarely lock my layers just because I do know ahead of time that I'm probably going to have to be able to manipulate it at some point. If I do lock it, it's normally the entire group that I'll lock to keep me from modifying it, because I'm essentially happy with it and I don't want to do any changes whatsoever. So in general, that's probably the only thing here. Channels and paths, unless, well, this is useful if you create a mask, essentially. So if I create a mask on here, and I want to show it, I want to see it, it's going to show me here. It automatically separates out your colors into all three layers, essentially. So if I turn these off, what it does is it actually turns off that color. So if I only want to see the black, I can do that, and it switches it essentially to grayscale. I want it in CMYK though. That's the setting that I have for printing settings, so I'm going to keep that there. Paths are more relevant when you're actually doing vectorized line work. If you're going to do heavily vectorized line work, however, I do suggest you switch to Illustrator. It's much more intuitive to work with. It's very similar to Photoshop, and it's a lot easier to use given what it's designed for. Photoshop is not a vectorizing software. That is not its forte. So if you're doing a lot of vectorized art, you probably want to stick with Illustrator. Okay. And that's it for this tutorial. In this tutorial I covered all the layers and information regarding that and some of the buttons on the bottom here and how they can be applied. So thank you for watching and take care.